What's going on, everybody? Kalipa's Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Motorola Moto G Play 2023 and going over whether or not it's actually a good phone to buy in 2023. Now, I know this phone just came out a couple months ago, but at this point in 2023, when it comes to phones in this price range, there are a lot of other options out there. So I want to go over some of the specs and features of this phone to give you a better idea of what kind of value you're actually getting for the money. Now, as always, if you do end up wanting to learn more about this phone, definitely check out the description, where we'll be linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the Moto G Play 2023, we're getting a 6.5-inch 90Hz IPS LCD display with a 720p resolution, a PPI of 270, and a 20:9 aspect ratio. So for this price range, this display is pretty much exactly average. I want to say almost every phone like this is going to have the same size, same dimensions, same resolution, and pretty much everything. The only slightly different thing about this phone is that with a 90Hz refresh rate, the movement on the screen is going to be a little bit faster and smoother, making the phone feel a little bit more premium to use, but honestly, in the grand scheme of things, this is really not going to make that much of a difference. So for all intents and purposes, for a more entry-level device, again, the display is pretty much average. That being said though, I definitely don't think it's bad. I mean, at 6.5 inches, it is decently large, and despite only having a 720p resolution, the image does look nice and sharp. So if you're consuming a lot of content like watching YouTube videos, maybe browsing the web, using social media, stuff like that, things are going to look pretty nice on here, and I feel like most people probably will get a decent experience. Now for storage, the Moto G Play is getting 32GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, and honestly, at this point in 2023, I really don't think this is enough for almost anyone. At this point, even if you do offload all your photos and videos and stuff like that onto a microSD card, with stuff like apps, the system, and just files in general getting larger and larger, your storage is still probably going to fill up pretty quickly. So unless you're someone who really doesn't do a whole lot on your phone, maybe you have like 5 apps and nothing else, then in that case, you should at least get by. But again, I feel like for most people, if you do plan on having any decent amount of apps, or maybe you just don't want to have to worry about storage, you are probably going to want to get something with a bit more. That being said though, keep in mind, in this price range, most phones like this are only going to have 32GB anyway. So compared to other phones like this, it's not really anything unusual. There are some phones out there that have more, but in general, unfortunately, even at this point in 2023, for an entry-level phone, having only 32GB of internal storage is still pretty much the standard. Now for security features, the Moto G Play does have a fingerprint scanner, but unfortunately, this phone does not have face unlock. Now, I feel like this is probably not that big a deal, because most people seem to like fingerprint scanners better anyway. But of course, just keep in mind, again, this phone does not have face unlock, so if you do get it expecting that feature, you will be disappointed. But real quick, let's give the fingerprint scanner a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So real fast and responsive, no issues at all. Now taking a look at the camera setup here, with the Moto G Play, we got a real nice looking hole punch design for the front facing camera. This camera is 5 megapixels. And yeah, for a front facing camera in a more entry level phone like this, definitely a real nice look here. I want to say most lower end devices are going to have a water drop notch instead, and while a lot of them don't really look bad, if you're doing something like watching a video in landscape mode, it's going to be a little bit more intrusive, whereas with the hole punch, obviously it still does show up a bit, but I feel like it's not nearly as bad. So definitely nice to see there. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 16 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So overall, for what it is, we definitely are getting a pretty decent camera setup here. It's kind of too bad this phone doesn't have an ultra wide camera, but there are plenty of other phones like this that don't either. I mean, for that matter, the Samsung Galaxy A14 5G, which is quite a bit more expensive and higher end than this phone, doesn't have an ultra wide camera either. So my point is, although I would have liked to see that feature on this phone, it's not really surprising that it doesn't have it. Aside from this, I do think for what it is, the camera is pretty good here. For the actual photo quality, sure, obviously, it's not going to be studio level or anything like that. So if you're someone who's constantly taking pictures and you get this phone expecting amazing quality, you will probably be a little let down, because with an entry level phone like this, you can only expect so much. That being said though, for more casual light use, I do think the photo quality is pretty good. And for stuff like taking a couple photos here and there to send to friends and family, something like Snapchat where the quality doesn't even matter, or even the occasional Instagram photo, for that kind of thing, this phone will still get the job done. To give you an idea of what it can do, here's some pictures taken with this phone. And again, for what it is, I definitely do think the camera is actually pretty good. For the average user, if you do want to get an occasional nice photo every now and then, but you don't really need anything crazy, again, I do think it is going to be perfectly fine. And I feel like if the average person looks at one of these photos, they're not going to instantly assume it was taken with a bad quality camera. So for more normal, practical use, the camera we're getting with the Moto G Play is honestly perfectly fine. Now when it comes to RAM and processor, this phone is getting 3GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio G37 processor. Now I'm gonna be honest here, when it comes to actual performance, this is a pretty slow phone. Sure, on one hand, if you're doing more light activities like occasional web browsing, social media, and watching YouTube videos or something like that every now and then, it is still gonna be fine, but if you're gonna be on your phone a lot, you will notice this is not really a fast device. And for that kind of more heavy activity, you are gonna wanna spend a bit more and get something a bit faster. But again, for what it's made for, really light occasional use and basically the bare minimum, I do think it's at least going to be good enough, and I personally haven't had any performance issues, so I would say in general, for an entry-level device like this, it's pretty much exactly what you would expect. Now I did run a benchmark test on this phone using Geekbench 5, and here are the results I got. So what I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone, and then comparing your results to these, and while I'm pretty sure this is probably not going to be an upgrade for anyone, at least that way you can see whether or not this phone's actually going to be that much of a downgrade, if it's even a downgrade at all. Because if your current phone is a lot faster, then you're probably not going to want to get something like this. But on the other hand, if you maybe don't really use your phone for a whole lot, and you really just want to replace whatever you may currently have, then in that case, I could see this phone making a bit more sense. But in general, compared to other phones like this, I feel like it's a little bit near the bottom. Sure, there are phones that are a bit slower, but honestly, at this point in 2023, you don't really have to spend a whole lot more to get a much faster device. I mean, if we're just looking at the full price alone, you can spend $30 more and get the Samsung Galaxy A14 5G, which is so much faster. I'm not even going to bother comparing this phone to that one. So my point is, even though I feel like probably most people are going to end up getting this phone for free or close to it, the fact still remains that if performance is really important to you, you can do quite a bit better pretty easily. Now for the battery, the Moto G Play 2023 is getting a 5000 mAh battery that supports 10W fast charging, so definitely really good here. If you're looking for a phone that has great battery life, maybe you're not always around a charger, but you still need something that's going to last all day, then in that case, for what it is, the Moto G Play is going to be a great option. That being said though, keep in mind, having a 5000 mAh battery is really not that unique. There are phones like the Moto G Power 2022 for example that are honestly better in almost every way. They have that same kind of battery. For example, since 2022 or even late 2021, every Samsung Galaxy A series phone I've seen also has a 5000 mAh battery. So my point here is, on one hand, if the battery is important to you, then yeah, the Moto G Play is going to be a great choice. But at the same time, just keep in mind, it's definitely not your only choice. Now, as far as the software goes, with the Moto G Play 2023, this phone does currently have Android 12, which honestly I found to be a little disappointing, considering the thing has 2023 in the name. Yet it still has Android 12 and not Android 13. Now, to be fair, as of the recording of this video, with the exception of Samsung's, I actually have yet to see another entry-level phone like this that does have Android 13. So with this phone, it's not like the software situation is unusually bad or anything. But at the same time, if you do want the latest version of Android and that's typically an important thing to you, then I could see this being a little disappointing. Now, I will say, just going off of what happened with the Moto G Pure, which is actually really similar to this phone, I'm pretty sure this phone is eventually going to get Android 13 at some point, but I have no idea when. So if having Android 13 is really important to you, then I would probably go with the Samsung Galaxy A series phone instead. That being said though, if you're not really that concerned about the software, and you just need something decently newer that works, then keep in mind, at this point, there's so many phones that still only have Android 12. So again, it's definitely not a unique situation. Another thing to keep in mind is that unfortunately with the Moto G Play, we're not getting NFC, so if you like to use tap and pay, you are going to want to get something else. Now, am I surprised? No, not really. After seeing a couple $100 Cricket phones in December that had NFC, I was hoping that in 2023, we would start to see more and more affordable devices with that feature, but so far that hasn't happened since. So yeah, if you do want to use tap and pay, then you are definitely going to want to skip this phone. Now, taking a look at the overall design, for a more entry-level device, I do think this phone actually does look pretty good. Most generic entry-level phones have water drop notch front-facing cameras, and the bezels are usually a lot thicker than this. So overall, if you are looking for something that's a little bit sleeker and more modern looking, I know a lot of people use cases anyway, so if that's you, you're probably not even going to notice. But it's always nice to have a good-looking design, so with the Moto G Play 2023, for what it is, I definitely can't complain. But in conclusion, is the Moto G Play 2023 actually worth buying in 2023? Now honestly, despite this really not being a bad phone for what it is and what it's meant for, at this point in 2023, in my opinion, these really basic entry-level 4G phones are starting to have less and less value. The reason I say this is because at this point, sure, this phone goes for $169 full price, and depending on carrier deals, you're probably going to get it for a lot less than that. But there's so many other phones that are a lot better that go for maybe a little bit more, like for example, again, the Samsung Galaxy A14 5G 5G. At full price, that phone is maybe $30 more than this. And with carrier deals included, you could probably get this phone or that phone for free. And if I had to choose between this and something like the Samsung Galaxy A14 5G, especially if they were pretty much the exact same price, I would definitely go with the Samsung. And even compared to other Motorola phones like the Motorola Moto G Stylus 4G or 5G, the main point here is the price difference between this phone and something much better is really not that big. I mean, 5G phones that have pretty decent performance are becoming more and more affordable. For example, if you have T-Mobile or Metro for that matter, you could get the T-Mobile Revel 6 for pretty much the same price as this. In fact, actually, the Revel 6 5G does go for $169 full price, just like the Moto G Play. And despite that not being the most amazing phone ever, I will say even off the top of my head, it is significantly better than this. So in general, I would say unless you can get this phone for free and you're really just looking for the absolute bare minimum and nothing else, then for the money, at this point in 2023, you can definitely do quite a bit better. Now, once again, if you do end up wanting to learn more about this phone, definitely check out the description because I will be linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalip's Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.